0419 hours, January 20th, 1991, southwest Iraq. Major Lev Orlov stared at the scope. The SA-2 site had been tracking a slow, high-altitude blip approaching from the southwest. A classic B-52 signature. Altitude 9,000 meters. Speed 780 km/h. No evasive movement. Routine. Predictable. The battery was ready. Target acquired. Then the screen flooded. Not with aircraft, but with noise. The scope turned white. Every band, every channel. VHF, OHF, L-band gone. The launch crew shouted. Missile interface went dead. Link lights blinked erratically. Consoles began to echo their own test signals. One officer screamed, "It's mirroring us!" Within 30 seconds, the site was blind. Orlov scrambled to coordinate neighboring batteries, only to find them gone too. Not destroyed, not powered down, just silent. All 6 SAM sites in the division showed the same anomaly. Dead radars, frozen command links, wideband static pulsing across the spectrum. He grabbed the encrypted phone. "Central, this is Orlov. Entire grid disabled. No impact, no destruction, only jamming." The reply came 2 minutes later, unconfirmed. B-52s have no such capability. Orlov stared at the smoke rising from the comms trailer. No fire, no bomb crater, just the whine of overloading signals. An invisible flood. It wasn't a bomb run. It was an occupation. Not by steel, by signal. And it had arrived through one aircraft. 1985 Voiska PVO Command Briefing Room, Moscow. Red banners lined the walls, ashtrays full, slide projector humming. The air was thick with certainty. The enemy was known, their methods predictable. The instructors didn't just teach confidence, they exuded it. A B-52 was a dinosaur, loud, big, easy to track, easier to shoot. Soviet air defense systems were layered, redundant, and overwhelming. Instructors referred to it as a missile sponge, jamming. It was a nuisance, not a threat. "Noise delays but doesn't deny," declared Colonel Matveev. "Power burns through confusion." Doctrinal beliefs were unshakable. No single jammer could saturate a full division. Spectrum control belonged to the defenders. Missile command systems were immune to spoofing. Credential drop, Member 1 Marshal Vladimir Tkachev, head of the PVO, famously said, "A bomber is a target, not a threat to systems." Operators were taught to rotate frequencies, switch pulse intervals, use passive angle tracking. Redundancy was their shield. In internal simulations, no ECM scenario lasted longer than 90 seconds. All concluded with system recovery and successful missile lock. The logic was fixed more emitters and waxed more chaos. One aircraft alone couldn't hold the field, especially not a B-52. That airframe was a Cold War relic, built for volume, not precision, a weapon of mass bombardment, not surgical disruption. "You don't win wars with radios," an instructor quipped. "You win them with explosions." And so, they trained for missiles. They trained for mass. They trained for steel. They never trained for a bomber that didn't fire a shot and still deleted the battlefield. The Soviet Integrated Air Defense System, IADS, was a triumph of central planning and layered logic. Its doctrine didn't rely on any single radar or missile. It relied on depth, detection, identification, tracking, engagement. Each stage passed through redundant systems. Early warning radars, P-14 scanned vast areas. Medium-range target acquisition, P-18's narrowed focus. Fire control radars, SNR-75s, SNR-125's guided missiles. Separate command links verified launch orders. Even if one radar was jammed, another frequency would take over. If one link failed, a backup circuit would engage. The system was a web pull one string. Another tightened. Core assumption. Jamming was local, tactical, narrowband. No one imagined strategic jamming, not from a bomber. Credential drop number 2, Colonel Yevgeny Baranov, one of the original designers of Warsaw Pact radar integration, stated disruption must pass through filters. That is why our layers overlap. What they didn't anticipate, a signal so wide, so adaptive, that it hit every layer at once. The system expected brute force saturation fighter groups, standoff jammers, electronic barrages. That's what American doctrine had used for decades. Instead, the B-52 brought precision noise, shaped, sculpted, synced. It didn't aim to jam individual radars. It aimed to mimic the system itself and override it. The IADS wasn't built for that. It expected saturation. It got surgical silence. The enemy didn't break one layer. It corrupted the core. 0418 hours, SA-2 sector, southwest Iraq. A B-52 enters the detection grid. Altitude 30,000 feet. No evasive pattern, just slow. Steady approach. The P-14 early warning radar blinks, then freezes. 041907 UHF control net blinks offline. 041912 SNR-75 fire control radar begins echoing its own signal. 41915 missile lock attempted system rejects target validation. 041918 adjacent SA-6 unit reports total loss of tracking. 041922 internal comms flashed loopback command confirmation code received, but none sent. 041930 grid-wide synchronization drops. 041933 4 radars go blind. 3 more echo static. 1 reports ghost confirmation. 042000 entire division enters blackout. 042007 launch order fails. 042012 radars shut down to prevent self-destruction. Major Orlov watches helplessly. The signal isn't just noise, it's talking back. Credentials fail, frequencies echo. Comms repeat orders that no one gave. Credential drop number 3. Intercepted message from Iraqi IADS unit system. Not responding. All bands echoing own signal. Operators shout into dead phones. Flip switches that obey nothing. Screens show health, but no control. Command believes it's a software failure until identical effects cascade across adjacent sectors. No bombs dropped, no missiles fired, only an old bomber, slowly passing overhead, and behind it silence, not from jamming, from total system overwrite. Back in Moscow, the reports sounded absurd. A single bomber jamming an entire missile division, nonsense. The initial GRU assessment labeled the event as localized failure with coincidental correlation. The prevailing theories: operator error during radar frequency handoff, accidental synchronization collapse between overlapping bands, faulty encryption between missile control and radar guidance. Quotes flew through the chain of command. No platform has that kind of spectral dominance. The B-52 is not a signal threat, it's a strategic relic. American jamming is tactical, not strategic. Credential drop, NAR-4. A classified GRU technical review concluded jamming events likely misinterpreted due to equipment fatigue and thermal overload. They dismissed the incident. Orlov's field report was returned with red ink. Words like signal mimicry and protocol spoofing were crossed out and replaced with possible internal feedback anomaly. New orders were issued. Confirm emitter health. Recertify missile command links. Replace field radar capacitors. The problem, Moscow believed, was not the bomber. It was the crew, the wiring, the maintenance, the environment, anything but the impossible. A B-52 that didn't fire only transmitted and still erased a battlefield that didn't fit doctrine. The official conclusion: temporary spectrum distortion, non-repeatable. But Orlov had seen the screens, and they didn't show distortion. They showed a ghost command network, one that spoke the system's own language and drowned out every voice inside it. To preserve doctrinal stability, Soviet engineers proposed a comfortable explanation: feedback loop failure. According to their theory, Multiple radars in close proximity may have accidentally re-amplified each other's signals. That could create internal echoes, overload the command link, and simulate a jamming event without an external cause. The solution: recalibrate sweep intervals, reduce simultaneous radar operation, install signal dampeners between adjacent systems. New training manuals were issued to field units. Limit pulse synchronization between sites. Reduce command uplink polling. Increase signal isolation during multiband tracking. It sounded precise, technical, plausible, but it was wrong. Credential Drop Orlov's next report detailed a new incident after full implementation of feedback prevention measures. Same B-52 pattern, same spectrum loss, same command echo, same silence. Even more disturbing, the B-52's signal had adapted. It skipped the early warning band and went straight for missile guidance. The system didn't overload itself, it was overwritten. And yet, Moscow clung to the theory. Because feedback loops meant control. It meant the threat came from inside. It meant the doctrine was intact. They adjusted the harmony. The silence remained. They diagnosed a malfunction. What they faced was a message. And that message was, "We can speak your network better than you can." When the feedback loop theory collapsed, Moscow turned to another suspect: friendly interference. Perhaps Iraqi systems uncoordinated, outdated, or misconfigured had unintentionally jammed Soviet radars. It made sense on paper. Iraq had old Chinese jammers, French-made ECM pods, and local radio traffic, all unregulated, all possible culprits. The new directive isolates Soviet radar networks from Iraqi equipment, segment communication nodes. Install hardline command backups across divisions. Signal barriers were deployed, comms rerouted through buried lines, radars operated in staggered windows. They unplugged the wires, they cleared the air, and the B-52 came again. Same effect. Credential drop. A Soviet radar operator near Al-Qut logged no Iraqi systems active. Radar lost contact. Launch denied. Same echo artifact. The theory shattered. There was no friendly interference, no overlapping jammers, no accidental overload. The silence had structure. The echo had language. Worse, the jamming now anticipated Soviet frequency hopping. Each time they changed bands, the noise arrived first. It greeted them like it had been waiting. Operators called it the ghost. It didn't just block. It predicted. It didn't overwhelm. It mimicked. Moscow's second theory failed just like the first because both assumed the attacker was brute force. But what jammed them wasn't loud. It was intelligent. And it had learned the system better than the people who built it. By late January 1991, alarmed by repeated grid collapses, the GRU launched an intelligence surge, Operation Net Freeze. Their goal: decode what was hitting their systems before it hit Moscow next. Analysts pored over signal recordings captured by mobile monitoring vans. Every second of waveform data was reviewed. They plotted pulse shapes, burst timings, harmonic overlays. They expected randomness, white noise, saturation. Instead, they found structure. Each blackout began with a subtle signature, an initial handshake pulse, like a false radar ID. Then came a waveform that didn't just block Soviet command bands, it replaced them. Credential drop, MER-5, a GRU lab report, marked eyes only, concluded jammers shaped to mimic command confirmation. Systems freeze, expecting orders that never come. It wasn't just noise, it was infiltration. The ALQ-155 on the B-52 didn't flood the sky. It spoke in the voice of the system. Confirmation pulses matched Soviet format. Uplink IDs spoofed. Launch orders rerouted to nowhere. Fail-safes never triggered because the system believed it was alive. Worse still, each new strike showed adaptive modulation. The jamming didn't repeat. It evolved, learned. matched new defenses in real time. The GRU called it synthetic possession. Operators weren't just blocked. They were overruled. The radar wasn't jammed. The radar was hijacked, and it obeyed the wrong master. There was no resistance, because the system never knew it had been taken. The Americans didn't just jam Soviet air defense. They rewrote its operating logic in real time. Technology 1 ALQ-155 ECM suite, B-52 mounted directly on the B-52, this pod was no ordinary jammer. It scanned incoming radar pulses, analyzed frequency, and responded with custom-tailored deception. Not white noise, signal replacement, Soviet expectation brute force jamming broad and blunt. American reality adaptive, surgical disruption. Combat result radars believed they were functioning while they were being spoofed. Technology 2 ALQ-122 communications, jammer, focused on disrupting missile command protocols. It replicated command confirmation pulses, sending standby or invalid lock messages to missile systems. Soviet expectation hard-coded launch validation. American reality real-time mimicry of control signals. Combat result missiles waited for orders that never came. Technology 3, beam-sculpted jamming power angle modulation. Instead of flooding the area, the B-52 focused energy into specific antenna lobes. Only the active receiving angles were hit, bypassing anti-jam failsafes. Soviet expectation wide-angle barrage, just clear trigger. American reality narrow-angle possession, no warning. Combat result systems didn't know they were being attacked. Technology 4, RC-135 plus B-52 signal pairing, the B-52 didn't act alone. AWACS and RC-135s mapped radar emissions. They transmitted false returns, making B-52s appear as entire strike packages. Soviet expectation 1 blip, one bomber. American reality 1 blip, our Phantom fleet. Combat result divisions responded to illusions. Technology 5 integrated seed coordination. F-4Gs armed with harms waited for radars to reactivate post-jam. Strike window opened the moment systems rebooted. Soviet expectation recovery, retaliation. American reality recovery moused trap. Combat result radars destroyed seconds after attempting to fight back. Credential drop, number 6, USAF ECM officers summary to command. We didn't jam them. We occupied them. This wasn't electronic warfare. It was systemic overwrite. The B-52 had become more than a bomber. It was a platform for erasure. And every time it passed overhead, an entire battlefield vanished with it. 0419 hours, January 20th, 1991, Sector Echo 9, southwest Iraq. The B-52 was still 40 kilometers out, altitude unchanged, speed slow, threat profile low, 041907, SA-2 radar, locked signal clean, 041910, VHF antenna receives foreign pulse, 41912 UHF band echo zone handshake, 41916 SNR-125 radar cycles 3 times, reads valid track, then freezes, 41918 missile launcher reports ready, 041920, confirmation signal blocked, 041923 launch switch fails to respond, 041926 backup fire control link echoes, false reset command, 041930, second radar offline, 42000 entire missile division, 9 batteries, 6 radars silent, no missile launched, no target fired upon, no system destroyed, just overridden. Battle score 1, B-52, 12 minutes of division-wide blackout. 32 radar nodes suppressed, 0 losses, 0 shots fired. Operators obeyed every protocol, followed every checklist. Their systems showed green. They never saw the kill switch had already been thrown. Credential drop after action summary. Soviet Liaison Division maintained full functionality. No weapons fired. All systems blocked from within. Reversal. They called jamming inconvenient. It became deletion. They called B-52s obsolete. One blinded an entire air defense sector. They built a network to repel saturation. It collapsed to a signal. And when the skies cleared, nothing burned, nothing moved, nothing worked. Because the battlefield hadn't been struck. It had been silenced. The aftermath in Moscow was not denial, it was confusion. Every protocol had been followed. Every radar had cycled. Every missile crew had been ready, and yet not one weapon had fired. The official review began not with battlefield analysis, but with doctrinal reevaluation. Soviet engineers realized they had made 4 catastrophic philosophical miscalculations. 1. Jamming was seen as noise, not language. Doctrine treated interference as random disruption, but the B-52's signal had syntax. It mimicked radar protocol and spoke in command pulses. Soviet belief noise delays, not controls. Reality noise commanded. 2. Redundancy immunity. Soviet IADS believed layers protected against single-point failure. But when every layer shared the same logic, a single exploit collapsed all of them. They didn't lose one system. They lost the template. 3. Power superiority. Soviet doctrine valued emitter strength, bigger transmitters, higher wattage, more range, but the B-52 didn't need power. It needed coherence. The stronger signal wasn't louder, it was more fluent. 4. Control, centralization. Missile launches required coded confirmations, safe, disciplined, predictable. But the B-52 mimicked those codes, and centralization became a backdoor. Credential drop, Soviet electronic warfare specialist. Post-review. We built a castle of mirrors. They walked in wearing our reflection. The IADS hadn't been defeated by speed, firepower, or maneuver. It had been undone by a single truth system speak. And if the enemy learns the language, your network becomes his weapon. The desert wind pushed sand across the dead site. A radar dish rotated in vain, its servos powered, its receiver blind. Below, the command trailer sat dark. Inside, a console still blinked, system status operational. Everything worked. Nothing responded. On the floor, the launch control manual lay open to the emergency override section. Unneeded. No missile had launched. There had been no signal to override. What happened wasn't an attack. It was a substitution. The B-52 never dropped a bomb. It never fired a missile. It spoke once and every Soviet system obeyed. It wasn't just a bomber. It was a message. Not steel, not speed, not stealth. Signal. A silent, airborne declaration. We know how you think, and we speak your machines better than you do. That radar wasn't just a weapon. It was a monument to an ideology. That centralized control brings